الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Throughout history, there has always been a struggle between the power of rationality and emotions. On one side, rationality pulls the power of the intellect, the power of the brain, logic, and mind, and the aql. And on the other side, you see the power of emotions and desires that pull, and you find for some people the power of logic overcomes the power of desires, and for others their desires control them and their lives and everything in their lives. And you see that this constant struggle, it takes place at every level in life. You see it taking place at a community level. At the whole community level, you see that there's a conflict between the power of logic and between emotions. And then you also find it at an individual level. You find it at a personal level. Within myself, there is that conflict. Just like within a community and within a country, within a group of people in a society, there's that conflict. But you find that that conflict also takes place at an individual level. And we have the Quran, we have the aql, and we have the power of the intellect that teach us to follow the intellect and resort to logic. And that is the only thing that will save you. That is the only thing that will help you succeed, especially in this era that we live in. We live in an era of modernity. And there are many that say that modernity and religion don't go hand in hand. In this era, religion is old news. Religion is history. Religion is old because religion resorts to emotions and relies on emotions. However, when we look at the religion of Islam, we see that the religion of Islam focuses on logic, focuses on rationality. We don't worship Allah through our emotions and through our desires. We worship Allah through our aql. We worship Allah through our intellect. We worship Allah through reason. And if you find that your faith, the foundation of your faith is based on emotions, then you need to go and check your faith. You need to go and fix it. Fix that problem and find the logic and the rationality behind your faith. And especially in the religion of Islam, it's easy to find. You don't need to go very far to find the rationality and logic behind worshiping Allah, accepting the Quran, accepting the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. Now the reason I started with this intro is because tonight we commemorate the life of an individual who relied on rationality. A person who relied on logic and the power of intellect, the power of hujjah to bring people, to gravitate people towards the faith of Allah, towards the faith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. And that is Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad AlSadiq alayhi salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Imam AlSadiq alayhi salam played a very important role in educating people, in guiding people, in spreading knowledge, and relying on rationality, relying on logic, relying on the power of the intellect to convince other people to accept the religion of Islam, to convince other people to accept the haqq. And you see that throughout his life, there were many that came to argue with him. There were many that came, they had power, they came with emotions to argue with him. But the Imam alayhi salam, he resorted to the power of logic, and he was able to guide so many people. Imam AlSadiq alayhi salam, he was so influential in his knowledge, where it wasn't just religious knowledge. Imam AlSadiq alayhi salam was able to teach many sciences, different groups of people, various groups of people, various sciences, various types of knowledge. That all goes back to the knowledge of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Because the Imam, he is one of the gates of knowledge after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And the knowledge, there's two types of knowledge. There's a knowledge that you go and you acquire at school, and then there's another knowledge that is given, divine knowledge. It's given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the knowledge that Allah speaks about Khidr in the Quran. Allah says, وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِن لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. The knowledge is from Allah. The knowledge is ilm ladunni, from Allah. It's not an acquired knowledge. It's a knowledge that is God-given. And this was the knowledge of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And this is why we, the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, one another name for the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, other than Shia, is Ja'fari. Why? Because we take probably 90% of our fiqh and 90% of our ideology, the ideology in understanding Allah and believing in Allah, the ilm al-kalam, that is taken from Imam AlSadiq alayhi salam, Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salam. So much of the knowledge that we have goes back to the knowledge of Imam AlSadiq alayhi salam. This great Imam who was born on the 17th of Rabi' al-Awwal, 17th of Rabi' al-Awwal in the year 80 after Hijrah, and he passed away in the year 148 after Hijrah. So he lived for 68 years, and he was the longest living Imam. Most of the Imams didn't even reach, none of the Imams other than Imam AlSadiq, from what I believe, reached the age of 60. Imam AlSadiq alayhi salam, he lived for 68 years, and he used that time to educate people. He used that time to teach people, to educate people. And he passed away after being poisoned by the caliph, by the king during his time, Al-Mansur al-Abbasi, on the 25th of Shawwal, a day like yesterday. The Imam passed away, and he was buried in Medina in the cemetery of Baqi'. Now, the Imam alayhi salam, he is the 6th Imam of the Ahlul Bayt. The 6th Imam that we, the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, take as an Imam that is chosen by Allah. His father is Imam Muhammad al-Baqir. His grandfather is Imam Zayn al-Abidin. His great-grandfather is Imam al-Hussein, and his uncle is Imam al-Hassan, and his great-great-grandfather is Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Ala Muhammad wa ali. The mother of Imam AlSadiq is Farwa, and her lineage goes back. She is Fatima, the daughter of Al-Qasim, the daughter of Muhammad, the daughter of Abu Bakr, the first Khalifa that is accepted by the majority of Muslims, the Sunnis, as the first Khalifa. Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, however, was raised in the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. And this is why Amir al-Mu'mineen, he says Muhammad, He's the son of he's my son. However, he's from the sulb of Abu Bakr. So Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr was raised in the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And he was killed on the side of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He was killed by the army of Muawiyah. And he was a devout follower of Amir al-Mu'mineen. So Farwa, Farwa, she is the granddaughter of Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr. One of the titles of Imam AlSadiq alayhi salam is Abu Abdullah. Anytime that you see in a hadith, it's written, Qala Abu Abdullah. Many of us right away, we assume that it's Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Yes, Imam al-Hussein is Abu Abdullah. But in hadith, in the literature, in the Islamic books, if you see the name Abu Abdullah, it refers to Imam AlSadiq alayhi salam. It refers to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And another title for the Imam is Al-Sadiq, the one who is truthful. And this is a title that was given to him by Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Before his birth, Rasulullah, he explains that the son, one of my sons, who is the son of Muhammad, who is the son of Ali ibn al-Hussein, who is the son of Hussein, he is Ja'far and his title is Al-Sadiq. And the Prophet, he would explain the qualities and the characteristics of the Imams that were not even born yet. But Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, in numerous hadith, he would come and he would explain the virtues and the merits of these Imams. And Rasulullah gave him that title, the title of As-Sadiq. And As-Sadiq means the one who is truthful. And you see that the Imam was sincere and was truthful with himself, with others, with his Lord, with people around him. He was so truthful that all Muslims, even the ones who did not accept him as an Imam from the Sunni school of thought, they all revere him and they would all accept his hadith. The hadith of Imam AlSadiq alayhi salam, he would not need to say, I heard from my father, who heard from his father, who heard. He would just say, Qala Rasulullah, and everyone would accept the hadith of Imam AlSadiq. Whereas any other narrator of hadith, any other person, they would ask them, where's your chain of narrators? Where's your chain? Where did you hear this from? If you're saying a hadith, referring it to Rasulullah, you have to say, where did you get this from? But Imam AlSadiq, he was the only one who would go out and say, Qala Rasulullah. He wouldn't need to say who he heard the hadith from. And everyone accepted the hadith of the Imam because the Imam was known as the honest, was known as the one who was truthful. Now, the political climate during the life of the Imam, it allowed for the Imam to be able to teach. It gave the Imam the freedom to be able to spread the message of the Ahlul Bayt and spread the true message of the Quran, the message of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. You see that all of the Imams, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he comes and he says, Saluni qabla an tafquduni. Ask me before you lose me. How many years did they allow Amir al-Mu'mineen to rule? How many people took advantage of the knowledge of Amir al-Mu'mineen? Then came Imam al-Hasan, who was persecuted. Then came Imam al-Hussein, who was killed. Then Imam Zayn al-Abidin, who had to live and educate people through other methods, through the dua and through other means. And then, after Bani Umayyah had committed so many crimes, the Umayyad dynasty, there were many rebellions. There were many revolutions and revolts going on against Bani Umayyah. One of them was Zayd al-Shahid, Zayd, the son of Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, who revolted against the caliph during his time, Hisham ibn Abd al-Malik, and he was killed. So there were many revolutions, many rebellions going on that weakened the Umayyad government. And there was another government that was rising. The Umayyad government was falling, and there was another government that was rising, and that was the Abbasi government. So during that time, between the fall of the Umayyad government and the rise of the Abbasi government, and until the time they had a firm grip on power, there were several years of freedom. And it was during those years that Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam and Imam AlSadiq established the school of Ahlul Bayt. That was the time that the Ahlul Bayt, they had the freedom to sit in the masjid and say, Qala Rasulullah this, and they would be able to explain. And especially that time came at its peak during the life of Imam AlSadiq alayhi salam. Even during the time of Imam al-Baqir, he died. He was poisoned by Hisham ibn Abdul Malik, one of the Umayyad caliphs. But the caliph was busy with the revolts and the rebellions. The Imam had some time, had some freedom. But the freedom came during the time of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. After Imam al-Baqir passed away, Imam al-Sadiq was 34 years old. So the Imam had several years. He had years to come and decades to be able to educate people, to sit in the masjid and teach people. And it was during that time that the Imam alayhi salam began to teach people the knowledge of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa. Not only the knowledge of Rasulullah, the Imam began to teach people many different sciences, because it was during the Abbasi era that many of the Greek books, the books of philosophy, Greek books of philosophy, they came and they were translated into Arabic because there was freedom. There was somewhat freedom. These books, they came from Greece and from Rome, and they were translated into Arabic. Today, when you read the book of Plato and Aristotle and the books of philosophy, the English books that you read today, where were these books derived from? Where did these books come from? These books came from the Muslims. It was the Muslims that translated these books. Once they translated these books, then they were translated back to the Europeans. They came and they got these books. Many centuries later, it was the Muslims that were living at their peak. It was the Muslims that were living in the golden era. And it was during that time that the Muslims were rising. But of course, it was also during that time that many different ideologies were entering the Muslim arena. Many different ideologies were entering the Islamic atmosphere. There were people that were atheists. There were people that did not believe in Allah. There were people that doubted the existence of Allah. They would come and they would sit in the masjid and tell people God doesn't exist, and here's a proof. One man says, I'm a God as well. I could be a God as well. How? He says, I could take away a life. I take an insect, I come and I kill the life. And then they tell him, okay, how can you bring life? He says, I could also bring life. He goes and he takes some garbage, he puts it in a pile, and then a few days later there's worms. He says, I am the one who came and brought life to this. So there were many people that needed the guidance. It was the Imam alayhi salam, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, who was able to guide people. It was the Imam who would sit and save the ummah, save the nation and the Muslim empire as a whole from the dilemma, from different sciences, different ideologies entering. Islam is not afraid of different ideologies. Islam is not afraid of science. Islam is not afraid of rationality. Yes, there are people that are uneducated, they are afraid. But Islam is not afraid. Islam embraced science. In fact, it was the Imam alayhi salam who, several of his students, they were the pioneers in science. Who is the father of chemistry today? A man who is known as the father of chemistry is one of the students of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam by the name of Jabir ibn Hayyan al-Kufi. This man, Jabir ibn Hayyan, he was one of the students of Imam AlSadiq alayhi salam. And when he begins his book explaining chemistry and science, he says, قال سيدي ومولاي جعفر بن محمد الصادق, and then he begins writing and explaining. So the knowledge that he took regarding chemistry and regarding science and astronomy and all of the sciences, that was taken from Imam AlSadiq alayhi salam. Because the Imam didn't just teach fiqh And he didn't just teach kalam and aqa'id. No, the Imam was an ocean of knowledge. The Imam was an ocean of knowledge, teaching people, educating people. And he would also teach people about their religion. He would teach people about Islam. He would teach people the correct ideology, the correct interpretation of the Quran, the correct understanding of the Quran. One of the narrators, he says, I entered Masjid al-Kufa and I saw, the Imam is in Medina. He says, I entered Masjid al-Kufa and I found 4,000 men sitting in Masjid al-Kufa. 4,000 sitting in Masjid al-Kufa, and I hear them sitting in circles. And each one saying, سمعت سيدي ومولاي جعفر ibn Muhammad AlSadiq, and they say the hadith. He says, I heard from my master, Sayyidi wa Mawlai Ja'far AlSadiq, and then they say the hadith. This is the great role that the Imam had. And this role that the Imam had, no one before him had that freedom to be able to educate at that level. And no one after him came and was able to educate. And of course, the Imam didn't just teach Shias. The Imam used to teach all Muslims. In fact, all of humanity is indebted to the knowledge of the Imam alayhi salam. Jabir ibn Hayyan, he's a chemist, but he took his knowledge from the Imam alayhi salam. Another man, Al-Mufaddal ibn Umar, he takes the Tawheed from the Imam. He has a book, Tawheed al-Mufaddal. You know what this book is? This book, it teaches the systems of the body, the circulation, how the blood circulates in the body. He talks about the heart, he talks about the eyes, he talks about the breathing mechanism. This is all taken from the Imam, and you could find this book, Tawheed al-Mufaddal. Why? Because this man, Al-Mufaddal ibn Umar, he heard another man, an atheist, sitting in the masjid of the Prophet, saying God doesn't exist. And he comes and he brings several arguments. And you know how some people, as soon as they have a little bit of knowledge, they come and they start becoming philosophers. He came and this man was sitting in the masjid and he's saying God doesn't exist, this and that. This man, Al-Mufaddal, he says, I was mesmerized by this person's knowledge. I couldn't go and argue with him. So I went to Imam AlSadiq and I came and I asked him about the body. I came and I asked him about the human body and the systems of the human body. He says the Imam, he sat with me for several hours and he began to explain to me. This was centuries ago, 1400 years ago, 1300 years ago. The Imam, he explains this. Today, my dear brothers and sisters, we have neglected the knowledge of the Imam. The knowledge of the Imam is there. The Imam alayhi salam, he had over 4,000 students. But then the Imam, he would complain of his loneliness, of his ghurba. He doesn't have real companions. Why? Because many people, they ignore the treasures of the Ahlul Bayt. We go and we're willing to read books of fiction, stories, movies, watching, doing so many things, but rejecting the knowledge of the Ahlul Bayt that is in the books. In the books. Today in the books, there are several books that have all of the knowledge of the Ahlul Bayt, the hadith of the Ahlul Bayt. Not all of them. Of course, many of it was burned, many of it was gone. But then the knowledge, the hadith, the Qala al-Baqir and Qala al-Sadiq, we have them in our books. But how many of us have memorized several hadith, one or two hadith of Imam al-Baqir and Imam AlSadiq alayhim salam? The Imam alayhi salam, he was able to teach people. He was able to guide people. Many different people. People from different sects. One of them, Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa, who is the leader of the Hanafi school of thought. The leader of the Hanafi school of thought, he studied for 2 years under Imam AlSadiq alayhi salam. And he says his famous quote, لَوْلَا السَّنَتَانِ لَهَلَكَ النُّعْمَانِ. If it was not for the 2 years, the Nu'man, referring to his name, would have perished. I wouldn't have known anything if it wasn't for those 2 years studying under Ja'far AlSadiq. Another Imam of the Sunni school of thought, Malik, Imam Malik ibn Anas, he also studied under Imam AlSadiq alayhi salam. And he says a famous hadith, he says, Wallah ma ra'at ayni, by Allah, my eyes have not seen anyone afdal min Ja'far ibn Muhammad, zuhdan wa fadlan wa ibadatan wa wara'an. He says, my eyes have not seen anyone better than Ja'far ibn Muhammad in piety, in akhlaq, in knowledge. This was the Imam. Today, you don't find anyone, even the ones who did not accept the Imam as a leader, you don't find anyone saying there's something wrong that any of the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt did. Can you find anyone today? They say Ali ibn Abi Talib did something wrong, Al-Hasan did something wrong, Imam AlSadiq did something wrong. Only, of course, there are some whose hearts are filled with hatred. But otherwise, the history of the Ahlul Bayt and the history of Muslims was not written by Shias. It was written by people who did not accept the Ahlul Bayt. But they are the ones who praise the Ahlul Bayt. And they are the ones who mention the merits of the Ahlul Bayt. So this was how the Imam alayhi salam, one of his methods, one of his important methods was that he was able to educate people through logic, through the power of the intellect, not forcing other people. And this is what we have to resort to, my dear brothers and sisters. Today we live in an environment, we live in an era where religion as a whole, not only Islam, but other religions as well, they're in a decline. Why? Because they say we live in an era of modernity. We live in an era of rationality. What's the use of religion when you live in an era of rationality and modernity? But we will also use rationality to argue. And this is what the Imam alayhi salam did. Following the verse of the Quran, ادعو إلى سبيل ربك بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة وجادلهم بالتي هي أحسن. Invite people towards the sake of your Lord with what? With hikmah, with wisdom. وَالْمَوْعِظَةِ الْحَسَنَةِ, and with the good admonishments, with the good akhlaq. This was the Imam alayhi salam. Many would come to debate him, ready to argue with him and debate with him. The Imam alayhi salam, with good akhlaq, with good morality, he would sit, he would debate with them. Sometimes he wouldn't debate. Sometimes he would say, you, one of my students, you go and you debate this man. And the students of the Imam, they would go and they would debate those men, and those men would become followers of the Ahlul Bayt. One of them was a man by the name of As-Sayyid Al-Himyari. As-Sayyid Al-Himyari was a poet, a very great poet, but he was not from the followers of the Ahlul Bayt. He was from the Kaysani movement, which they believed that Ibn al-Hanafiyah, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyah, he was an Imam. And they believed that he was the Mahdi and something like that. He was from the Kaysani movement. He comes, he speaks to the Imam, he has one session, 1 hour with the Imam. 1 hour with the Imam, and he leaves the room as a follower of the Ahlul Bayt. One session he has with the Imam, and then he comes out in front of his friends, in front of his people, in front of his other followers, the others who followed the Kaysani movement, and he says, تَجَعْفَرْتُ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ أَكْبَرُ وَأَيْقَنْتُ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْفُو وَيَغْفِرُ. He says, I became a Ja'fari. تَجَعْفَرْتُ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ أَكْبَرُ. And I have yaqeen that Allah will forgive me for my sins. I have yaqeen that Allah will forgive me for the wrong path that I was on, because now I am on the right path, the path of the Ahlul Bayt. This man, As-Sayyid Al-Himyari, he became one of the poets who would mention the merits of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And he has poetry remembering Imam al-Hussein. He has many poetry remembering the fada'il of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And they say that when he came to die on his deathbed, he had a very difficult time. You know, sometimes some people during those last stages, A very difficult time. So he had the people he used to be on their sect, the Kaysanis, and he had the followers of the Ahlul Bayt on one side, and the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, they were in shock. How is this man who has joined the path of the Ahlul Bayt, how is he suffering on his deathbed? And the others, the Kaysani, they're saying, look, this is what happened. You left our madhab. This is what's happening with you. You are suffering right now on your deathbed. This man, suddenly, there was a white mark on his forehead. They see it, and suddenly he was able to speak. He wasn't able to speak before that. He was able to speak, and he began to recite another verses of poetry. He says, كذب الزاعمون أن عليا لا ينجي محبه من هناتي قد وربي دخلت جنة عدن وعفاني الإله عن سيئاتي فأبشروا اليوم أولياء علي وتولوا عليا حتى الممات ثم من بعده تولوا بنيه واحدا بعد واحد بالصفات. He says, those who believe that Ali will not save have lied. I have entered the paradise. I entered the paradise and I saw the position of the followers of Ali ibn Abi Talib. So, oh my dear brothers, follow Ali and follow the Imams from Ali ibn Abi Talib, from the children of Ali ibn Abi Talib, one by one from the children of Ali ibn Abi Talib. And then he took his last breath and he passed away. This was one of the followers of Imam Ja'far AlSadiq, who the Imam changed him with a few words. A few words, and the Imam, he says, تَجَعْفَرْتُ بِسْمِ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ أَكْبَرُ. This was the Imam. He was able to captivate the minds and the hearts of people. And therefore, you find that many scholars were his students. Scholars of philosophy, scholars of chemistry, scholars of mathematics, scholars of medicine and astronomy. They were all the students of the Imam alayhi salam. So, this is one aspect of the life of the Imam. Another aspect, very important aspect of the life of the Imam, is that the Imam did not only educate people. Today you go to universities, you see educators, but you don't find people that will raise a society. You don't find people that will raise and discipline a community. Sometimes you find that the one who is an educator, he's the worst role model for these students that are attending the class. But the Imam alayhi salam, he's a ma'soom. The Imam was a leader appointed by Allah. Therefore, he was the best role model. He wasn't just it wasn't just knowledge. It was a lifestyle that the Imam alayhi salam was instilling and placing in the hearts of his followers. This is why he goes to his followers, the ones who were very proud to call themselves Shia. He tells them, لا تذهبن بكم المذاهب فوالله ما شيعتنا إلا من اتقى الله وأطاعه. Don't be very proud. I'm a Shia. I'm a follower of the Ahlul Bayt. Because our Shia by Allah are only the ones who have piety in Allah and obey Allah. Those are our Shi'as. The Imam alayhi salam, he constantly tells his Shi'as, tells his followers, كونوا زينا لنا ولا تكونوا شينا علينا. Be adornments for us. He would tell his followers, I don't want you to do anything. So people say, look at the followers of Ja'far. Look at the followers of Ja'far, what they're doing. Be people that when people see you, they say, Rahimallah Ja'far. He raised good people. He raised good students. This is how the Imam wants us to be. This is the words of the Imam alayhi salam. On his deathbed, he gathers his family. Abu Basir, one of the companions of the Imam, he says, I entered on the house of the Imam after the passing of the Imam alayhi salam. So the wife of the Imam and the mother of Imam al-Kadhim, Hamida al-Barbariyah, she opens the door and I go to give my condolences to her for the passing of Imam AlSadiq. She tells me, welcome, welcome. I have something to tell you. So he says, I go in the house, and she tells me, only if you were here to see the ajab that I saw during his last moments. He tells her, what did you see? He tells her, he called all of the children of Abi Talib. He called all of the children of Ali ibn Abi Talib, all of the relatives. He gathered them around him, and then he tells them, Wallah la tanalu shafa'atana mustakhifan bisalatih. He says, by Allah, our shafa'ah will not reach, our intercession will not reach anyone who belittles their prayer. Not someone who doesn't pray. Someone who belittles their prayer, that person will not receive the shafa'ah of the Ahlul Bayt on the Day of Judgment. This is what it means to be a follower of the Ahlul Bayt. Being a follower of the Ahlul Bayt means one that prays. Don't come and say, I'm a Shi'ah, I'm a follower, but I don't pray. Without prayer, we won't be able to get anywhere. These are the words of the Imam alayhi salam during his last moments. This was one aspect of the life of the Imam. A third aspect of the life of the Imam is that the Imam alayhi salam had to deal with tyrants. He had to deal with kings and rulers that would come and rule with the sword, with the iron fist. But the Imam alayhi salam, he resorted to the power of logic. They would resort to power, he would resort to logic to be able to stand and withstand the tyranny of these leaders. And the worst of those leaders that the Imam lived during his time was Al-Mansur al-Abbasi, who was the second Abbasi caliph, the second Abbasi king. The first was As-Saffah, who came, and his name is As-Saffah, the one who caused bloodshed. He caused so much bloodshed. And then came Al-Mansur. And of course, these leaders, they would come, these kings and leaders and caliphs, they would come and they would go. And the followers of the Ahlul Bayt, there were many of the Shi'as of the Ahlul Bayt, they would come and they would tell the Imam, let us rebel. Let us rebel against these leaders, these corrupt tyrants. But the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, they had a lesson from Karbala. They had a lesson from the betrayal of the Ummah from Karbala, the betrayal of the Ummah during the time of Imam al-Hasan and during the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen. So this is why the Imams, they did not revolt, because there were very little followers. One of the scholars, Ibn Shahrashub, in his book Al-Manaqib, he mentions that a man came from Khurasan. A man came from Khurasan, and he tells the Imam, you have 100,000 swords waiting for your order. You have 100,000 men waiting for your order. As soon as you say, go and fight, we will enter, we will unleash those 100,000 to go. The hadith says that the Imam, as he's talking to this Khurasani man, one of the companions by the name of Harun al-Makki, he walks in on the Imam. So the Imam alayhi salam, he tells the Khurasani, he tells him there was a tannoor, there was an oven that was lit. He tells the Khurasani, go and jump in the tannoor, go and sit in the oven, in the tannoor. The Khurasani man says, oh my master, you want to burn me? Please don't do this to me. So the Imam tells him, okay, you're fine, you don't need to do that. Then Harun al-Makki, he walks in. The Imam, he's walking in, he has his sandals in his hands. The Imam tells him, oh Harun, go and sit in the tannoor. Harun, without saying a word, he goes and he sits in the burning tannoor, burning oven that was burning. He goes and he sits in it. And then the Imam, he begins to talk to the Khurasani. He begins to have small talk with him. And the man, he's looking at Harun. What's happening to this man? He goes and he looks. He sees Harun al-Makki is sitting. Nothing happened to him. Then the Imam alayhi salam, he tells the Khurasani, He tells him, when you have a handful of men like Harun al-Makki, then come to me and ask me to go and fight the Khalifa. You want me to be killed like my grandfather Imam al-Hussein was killed and betrayed? When you have a handful of men like Harun al-Makki, then come to me. And this is an answer to the ones who constantly ask, why doesn't Imam al-Mahdi rise? When is the time for Imam al-Mahdi? It's not that we are the ones who have to ask when the Imam will come. It's the Imam that's waiting when we will get our acts together, when we will be ready for the Imam. Otherwise, the Imam is waiting. Otherwise, the Imam, he is ready and he is waiting. But then you see that the Imam alayhi salam, although he did not fight the Khalifa during his time, he had his own methods of standing against the tyrants. The Imam, just because he didn't fight, just because he didn't raise a sword to fight the tyrant of his time, it doesn't mean that the Imam alayhi salam remained quiet. No, the task and the job of the Imam is to enjoin the good and forbid the evil at all times, no matter who the person is, even if it's the most powerful person. One day, he's sitting with the Al-Mansur al-Dawaniqi, the man who was responsible for poisoning the Imam. There was a fly that kept flying and it would keep sitting on the nose of the Al-Mansur. And this man, he's powerful, he's a king, he's a leader, he kills so many people. As soon as he came to power, he killed many from the children of Imam al-Hasan, many from the children from the Alawiyin. He killed many of them. But then he has a fly that is flying around him, annoying him. So he asks the Imam, he tells Imam AlSadiq, لِمَا خَلَقَ اللَّهِ الذُّبَابِ? Why did Allah create the fly? The Imam alayhi salam, he tells him, لِيَذُلَّ بِهِ أُنُوفِ الْجَبَابِرَةِ, so that Allah degrades and brings down and humiliates the Jabbar, the one who thinks that he's a powerful, mighty person. One fly, it comes and it makes this person so small. It comes and it humiliates this person. لِيُذِلَّ بِهِ أُنُوفِ الْجَبَابِرَةِ. In another occasion, Mansur, he calls the Imam and he tells him, why don't you visit us like everyone else visits us? Many of the scholars, Abu Hanifa, many of the others, they come, they visit us, we give them money and then they go. And then they praise us in front of people. So the Imam, he replies to him, لَيْسَ لَنَا مِنْ أَمْرِ الدُّنْيَا مَا نَخَافُكَ عَلَيْهِ. He says, we don't have anything in this dunya that we're afraid you're going to take from us. If it's our life, we're not afraid that you will take our life from us. And then, وَلَا عِنْدَكَ مِنْ أَمْرِ الْآخِرَةِ مَا نَرْجُوهُ مِنْكَ. And you don't have anything in the afterlife that we come and we want from you. You don't have anything to offer in the afterlife. وَلَا أَنْتَ فِي نِعْمَةٍ فَنُهَنِّئَكَ بِهَا. And you don't have anything, a ni'mah, just because you're in power, it doesn't mean that you have been blessed. You don't have anything good that we could come and congratulate you. وَلَا فِي نِقْمَةٍ فَنُعَزِّيكَ بِهَا. And you're not suffering that we come and we have to give our condolences to you. So then Mansur, he says, come tasbahana litansahana. Come and be my advisor so that you can help me, you could guide me. So then the Imam, he tells him, من أراد الدنيا لا ينصحك ومن أراد الآخرة لا يصحبك. He tells him, he who wants the dunya will not come and give you advice. And he who wants the akhirah, the afterlife, will not be one who is with you, a companion with you. Eventually, the Khalifa, he was so jealous of the Imam because the Imam is loved, the Imam is honored. Many people are mentioning the name of the Imam. He would ask his governor in Medina to punish the Imam, to torture the Imam. Many times the Imam, they would come and they would harass the Imam. One day, Al-Mansur, he goes and he calls for the Imam to be sent to him. But then he tells Al-Rabi', the man who was his advisor, He tells him, I want you to bring Ja'far AlSadiq, dragging him to me. Dragging him to me. So Al-Rabi' he goes, he tells the Imam, Mansur is calling you. The Imam tells him, let me put on my clothes. Let me put on my clothes so that I can go. He tells him, no, Mansur has asked that I drag you to him. So then the Imam, he tells him, go ahead, do what you have to do. So Rabi', he takes his hands on the shirt of the Imam and he begins to drag him in the street until he takes him to Mansur. But then, of course, as soon as Mansur, his eyes fall on the Imam had been reciting a dua. Suddenly he changes, he goes and he begins to hug the Imam. But this was the hypocrisy that caliph was living. He asked the governor of Medina to burn the house of the Imam. One day they go and they set a fire to the house of the Imam alayhi salam. And subhanallah, the house of Fatima was burned. The tents of Imam al-Hussein were burned. And the house of Imam AlSadiq was also burned. They go and they set a fire to the house of the Imam. The companions of the Imam, they come and they help the Imam leave the house. They see the women and the children, they begin to run across the house to leave, to escape the fire that's in the house. They rescue the Imam, they extinguish the fire. Then the next day the companions of the Imam, they come and they see the Imam alayhi salam sitting in his house and crying. They come and they tell him, Ya Aba Abdullah, why are you crying? What has happened to you? If you are worried about your home, if you are worried about your belongings, we will reimburse you. We will give you all that you have lost. The Imam alayhi salam, he says, it is not my belongings, it is not my home that I'm worried about. When I saw my women and my children running across the house, I remembered the children of Aba Abdullah as they were running on the sand dunes of Karbala with no one to help them, with no one to support them. And the enemies were burning the tents of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein. This is what made me cry. And this was the life of the Imam. The Imam alayhi salam, all of the Imams, in every scenario, every time they have the opportunity to remind people of Karbala, to remind people of Imam al-Hussein, they would take that opportunity. He goes and he tells his companions, Allahumma arham tilka as-sarkhati allati kanat lana. May Allah have mercy on the cries that cried for us. He would encourage his followers to cry for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Allahumma arham tilka al-wujuh allati taqallabat ala qabri Abi Abdullah. Oh Allah, have mercy on the ones who go and visit the grave of Aba Abdullah and cry for Aba Abdullah and perform the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Eventually the Khalifa, he poisoned the Imam, and the Imam was buried. He was buried in Baqi' next to his father Imam al-Baqir, next to his grandfather Imam Zain al-Abidin, next to his uncle Imam al-Hassan. That is the grave that until today there is no grave, a destroyed grave for this great scholar of the Ummah, this great Imam. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah.